For generations, the story of Africa was written by others. Maps were drawn, borders carved, and fortunes extracted, while the voices of the people themselves were muted under the weight of empire and economic design. What began as conquest evolved into contracts, and what started as force became finance. The continent that fed the world's hunger for gold, oil, and diamonds was told it could not feed itself. But the old playbook is fraying, and a new one is being written by Africans who understand that prosperity is not granted, it is built. To understand the plan that kept Africa poor, one must begin at the crossroads of history, where independence met dependence. When colonial flags were lowered, a different system remained. Export what is raw, import what is refined. Nations that grew the coffee could not roast it. Those that mined the copper could not shape it. Prices were set abroad, debts were signed in foreign currencies, and the invisible hand often carried a foreign glove. Yet beneath that structure, resilience endured. The decades after independence were turbulent. Promises of freedom collided with the machinery of global economics. Leaders who dreamed of continental unity faced coups, sanctions, and the cold winds of geopolitics. The International Monetary Fund and the World Bank offered loans that came with long shadows, structural adjustments that slashed education budgets, privatized public goods, and left nations caught between paying interest and feeding citizens. The statistics told one story, the people told another. In the villages and townships, innovation never stopped. A farmer in Ghana learned to use mobile phones to check cocoa prices. A woman in Nairobi turned microloans into a business that fed 10 families. A young engineer in Lagos designed solar lamps for homes that the grid forgot. While global institutions debated development, Africans were already developing. The plan to keep Africa poor was never just about money. It was about control of value. For every ton of raw material exported, value multiplied elsewhere. For every skilled graduate who left, talent compounded abroad. But today, that equation is shifting. A new generation is questioning not only how to earn, but how to own. They are coding apps in Kigali, launching satellites from Abuja, and building fintech companies that connect entire regions without passing through colonial currencies. Trade is the new liberation. The African Continental Free Trade Area is quietly linking 54 nations into the largest market on Earth. Borders that once divided are becoming bridges of commerce. When goods move freely, ideas follow, and when ideas move, prosperity is never far behind. It is not a revolution of slogans, but of spreadsheets, policies aligned with ambition. Across the continent, governments are renegotiating what wealth means. In Botswana, diamond revenues fund education instead of exile profits. In Rwanda, public transparency and digital governance are rewriting expectations. In Ethiopia and Egypt, new industrial corridors hum with machines that once only existed overseas. Even in resource-rich nations long trapped by the curse of plenty, citizens are demanding contracts that favor the people, not the brokers. Foreign powers still compete for influence, but Africa is learning to play the long game. China builds infrastructure. The United States offers security partnerships. Europe proposes green transitions. Yet this time, African leaders are not simply recipients. They are negotiators. The proverb says, "Until the lion learns to write, every story will glorify the hunter." Today, the lions have pens. Technology is the great equalizer. Smartphones in remote villages connect farmers to satellite weather data. Digital currencies bypass banks that once denied credit. Young filmmakers stream their documentaries worldwide without waiting for Western distributors. Culture, finance, and politics are converging into one undeniable truth. Africa is no longer waiting for permission. Still, the obstacles are real. Debt burdens remain heavy. Illicit financial flows drain billions each year. Climate change threatens harvests and coastlines alike. But even these challenges are forging cooperation. Solar corridors stretch across the Sahel. African universities partner to share research. The continent's youth, its most abundant resource, are demanding results, not rhetoric. The myth of a poor Africa served many interests. It justified aid instead of partnership, pity instead of respect. But myths crumble under evidence. The world's fastest-growing cities are African. Its youngest populations, its richest deposits of critical minerals, its innovators, all point toward inevitability, not impossibility. The plan to keep Africa poor was never sustainable because it ignored the simple law of demographics and desire. A billion people will not stay silent forever. Listen to the new voices echoing from Accra, Dakar, Nairobi, and Johannesburg. They are journalists questioning power, economists rethinking policy, artists redefining identity. They speak not of charity, but of choice. They are tired of being data points in other people's graphs. Their ambition is not to escape Africa, but to transform it. In the global boardrooms where strategies are drawn, the tone is changing. Investors once hesitant now realize that Africa is not a single story, but 54 opportunities. Ports are modernizing, digital corridors expanding, and startup hubs multiplying. The capital once extracted is beginning, however slowly, to return. It arrives through diaspora remittances, venture funds, and partnerships that measure profit not just in dollars, but in dignity. The story of failure is being replaced by a story of foundation. The foundations are fragile but firm enough to build on: regional trade, renewable energy, digital governance, and a population whose median age is 19. The math of the future favors Africa. The question is whether its institutions can keep pace with its imagination. Education is shifting from rote learning to problem solving. Universities in Ghana, Kenya, and South Africa are partnering with global tech firms to create ecosystems of innovation. Graduates no longer look only to migrate. Many are staying to build. They see the continent not as a burden, but as a blank canvas. Culturally, a quiet revolution brews. Afrobeat fills stadiums in Paris and New York. Nollywood rivals Hollywood in output. African fashion dominates runways, and literature from Lagos to Lusaka redefines modern identity. Soft power, the ability to shape perception, is rising alongside economic power. Every plan to suppress eventually collapses under its own contradictions. The forces that sought to control Africa's destiny are discovering that interdependence runs both ways. As the world transitions to renewable energy, it needs cobalt, lithium, and rare earths, all abundant in African soil. Negotiation tables are turning. The same minerals that once fueled exploitation now fuel leverage. Across the continent, citizens are demanding transparency in resource deals, environmental responsibility, and reinvestment in local communities. Civil society is louder than ever. Social media amplifies every broken promise and every triumph. Accountability, once a whispered dream, is becoming an expectation. The pandemic exposed the fragility of global supply chains, but also highlighted Africa's resilience. Local manufacturers produced masks, sanitizers, and eventually vaccines. In crisis, the continent did not collapse, it adapted. That adaptation is the heartbeat of progress. Africa's future will not be written in foreign capitals, but in its classrooms, boardrooms, and streets. The generation rising today has seen both scarcity and potential. They understand that globalization without fairness is just another form of control. They are building platforms, companies, and movements that reflect a continent in motion. The plan to keep Africa poor is failing not because it was defeated in battle, but because it became irrelevant. The world cannot contain a billion dreams, nor can outdated policies restrain a connected generation. Each new invention, each fair trade agreement, each reformed institution is another thread in the fabric of autonomy. So the story turns. The same headlines that once spoke of crisis now speak of creation. The same streets that once echoed protest now hum with entrepreneurship. The continent is not waiting to be saved. It is saving itself through grit, imagination, and unity. The future that was postponed is arriving ahead of schedule. And as Africa rises, the world will have to adjust its lens. The narrative of charity will give way to that of partnership. The vocabulary of aid will be replaced by investment, and the image of dependency will dissolve into one of destiny. The sun that sets on one order always rises on another. For centuries, the wealth of Africa was measured in what left its shores. Now it will be measured in what stays and in what grows. This is not optimism, it is observation. The numbers, the innovation, the sheer willpower cannot be ignored. The plan to keep Africa poor has run out of time. The continent that once served as the world's supplier of raw goods is becoming the workshop of the future. The silence has broken. The narrative has shifted, and the world, at last, is beginning to listen.